Abandoned in a deadly snowstorm, Evelyn Harrow thought she had no more fight left. Her stepfather had cast her out, leaving her to die in the freezing cold. Just as she sank into the storm's grip, a voice broke through the chaos. "I've been searching for you, the Duke of Ravenshaw." But why would a man like him search for someone with nothing? What secret had he been keeping? And why did she feel a strange pull to trust him, despite the danger lurking in his eyes? Hello, lovely. If you're enjoying this historic romantic tale, I'd be so grateful for a like or a subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories of love, longing, and history. And if you're up for it, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every note, and it always brings a smile to my face. Chapter 1. The Winter's Cruelty. The wind shrieked like a living thing, tearing through Evelyn's thin dress with merciless fury. She stumbled forward, her bleeding fingers clutching at nothing, the world around her reduced to endless white. Snow stung her face like 1,000 needles, each gust threatening to knock her off her feet and into the drifts that reached her knees. Keep moving. Just keep moving. But her legs betrayed her, trembling violently beneath her weight. The worn boots, the only pair Cedric had left her, were soaked through, her toes so numb she could no longer feel them. Each step sent shooting pain up her calves, her muscles screaming in protest against the cold that had seeped into her very bones. She had lost the road some time ago, or perhaps there had never been a road at all. The carriage tracks had vanished beneath the relentless snow, and the trees, when she could see them through the blizzard, all looked the same, dark sentinels in an endless frozen wasteland. This morning, the thought clawed its way through her fading consciousness. This morning, I was alive. She had been in her small attic room when Cedric found the letter. The sound of his boots on the stairs had sent ice through her veins. He never came to her room unless he meant to hurt her. The door had slammed open, and there he stood, her stepfather, his face purple with rage. In his fist, crumpled and torn, was Mr. Pembroke's letter. "What is this?" His voice had been deadly quiet, more terrifying than if he had shouted, "What have you been doing, you ungrateful wretch?" Evelyn had risen from her chair, her heart hammering. "I only asked questions. About my father's estate, about—" The blow came without warning. His hand connected with her cheek, sending her sprawling across the threadbare rug. Stars exploded across her vision. "You think to challenge me?" Cedric loomed over her, his face twisted with fury. "You think you have rights? You're nothing, a burden I've carried too long. Your mother's weakness lives in you." She had tasted blood, felt it warm against her split lip, but she had forced herself to meet his eyes. "Mr. Pembroke said something about my 21st birthday, about my father's will." Another blow, harder this time. She felt something crack in her jaw. "Your father's will?" Cedric laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your father was a fool who left you nothing but debts and disappointments, just like your simpering mother, always thinking herself better than she was. That's not true." He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her to her feet. "I have fed you, housed you, tolerated your presence for years, and this is how you repay me? By sneaking around, writing letters, asking questions?" Tears had streamed down her face, but she had refused to cry out. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Cedric had dragged her down the stairs, calling for his men. Two of them appeared rough men who did his dirty work, men who wouldn't question his orders. "Take her to the gamekeeper's cottage," he had ordered, shoving her toward them. "Leave her there. Let her learn what gratitude means." But she had seen it in his eyes. The cold calculation, the finality. He didn't mean for her to learn anything. He meant for her to die. The memory fractured as Evelyn's foot caught on something beneath the snow. She fell hard, her hands plunging into the icy drifts. Pain lanced through her palms, they were bleeding. She realized distantly. The cold had cracked her skin open. She tried to push herself up, but her arms wouldn't support her weight. Her body had nothing left to give. "They didn't even take me to the cottage," she thought, almost laughing at the cruelty of it. The men had thrown her from the carriage miles from anywhere, their laughter echoing in her ears as they disappeared into the storm. "Nothing personal, miss," one had said, not unkindly, "but Lord Harrow pays well, and dead girls tell no tales." 2 years. It had been 2 years since her mother died, and in that time, Cedric had systematically destroyed her. First came the cold indifference, no more pretending to be the concerned stepfather, then the cruelty, harsh words, degrading tasks, being made to eat with the servants. Then came the starvation ration scraps from the kitchen, if she was lucky. Finally, confinement to the attic room, locked away like a shameful secret. She had endured it all because what choice did she have? A woman alone, with no fortune, no family, no prospects. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, until Mr. Pembroke's letter arrived last week. She had bribed a kitchen maid to post her inquiry months ago, a desperate gamble, reaching out to her father's old solicitor. His response had been brief but tantalizing. "Come to my office in London. Your 21st birthday changes everything. There are matters regarding your father's will that require immediate attention." She had turned 21 just 7 days ago. Cedric hadn't acknowledged it, of course, but she had marked it privately, had felt a tiny flame of hope kindle in her chest. Perhaps there was something. Perhaps her father had left her a small inheritance after all, enough to escape, enough to live. But Cedric had found the letter before she could act on it, and now she was here, dying in the snow, that tiny flame extinguishing with every labored breath. Her dress the same thin cotton she had worn for months because Cedric insisted she needed to learn economy, provided no protection against the cold. He had sold all her good clothes, her winter cloak, even her mother's shawl. Everything of value had been stripped away, piece by piece, until she had nothing left. Nothing but the name her father had given her, and the memories of a life that felt like a dream. Eveline's vision began to blur. She could no longer feel her hands, her feet, her face. The cold was everywhere now, seeping into her chest, her heart, her mind. "Mama," she thought, and for a moment she could see her mother's face, kind and gentle, with sad eyes that had seen too much. "Forgive me. I tried." She had tried to be strong like her mother had begged her to be in those final fevered moments, had tried to endure, to survive, to outlast Cedric's cruelty. But she was so tired, so very tired. Her mother had died in this same winter cold, though she had at least had a bed and a fire. Eveline wondered if Mama had felt this same creeping numbness, this strange peace that came with surrender. "Perhaps I'll see you soon," Eveline thought, her eyes drifting closed. "Perhaps we'll finally be together again." The wind howled around her, burying her slowly in its white embrace. She couldn't move anymore, couldn't fight, could barely breathe. The world faded to white, then grey, then a darkness that felt almost welcoming. "At least he won't win," was her final, defiant thought. "At least I'll be free." She didn't feel the cold anymore, didn't hear the wind. Everything was quiet, peaceful, still. And then, a sound, distant, rhythmic, impossible. Thunder. No, not thunder. Hooves. The pounding of hooves against frozen ground. Through the gathering darkness, through the numbness that had claimed her, Eveline felt a flicker, not of warmth, not yet, but of something. Hope. It was absurd. No one traveled in storms like this. No one would be looking for her. No one even knew she was here. But the sound grew louder, more insistent, breaking through the howling wind. Someone was coming. Eveline tried to lift her head, tried to call out, but her body wouldn't obey. Her lips wouldn't form words. She could only lie there in the snow, that impossible sound growing closer with every heartbeat. "Please," she thought, sending the prayer out into the storm. "Please." The darkness pulled at her again, stronger this time, determined to claim her. But she held on, because someone was coming. And for the first time in 2 years, Eveline Harrow dared to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, she might survive after all. The hoofbeats grew thunderous, shaking the ground beneath her. She felt, rather than saw, the massive shape that appeared through the white curtain of snow, felt the sudden stillness as the horse stopped. And then, through the roaring in her ears, through the cold that threatened to take her, a voice, deep, urgent, warm. "Hold on, just hold on." Strong arms lifted her from the snow, and even through the layers of numbness, she felt it warmth, safety. Something she hadn't known in so long she'd forgotten what it felt like. A cloak wrapped around her, heavy and lined with fur, smelling of leather and cedar and life. And then that voice again, closer now, fierce with determination. "I've been searching for you." Eveline's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. Through the snow and her failing vision, she saw him, a man's face, strong and handsome, with eyes that burned with an intensity that cut through the storm. She tried to speak, to ask who he was, why he was here. But the darkness claimed her at last, pulling her down into its depths. Her final conscious thought was not of fear or pain, but of wonder. "Someone searched for me." And then there was nothing but warmth and darkness, and the steady rhythm of hoofbeats carrying her away from death and into an uncertain future. Chapter 2. The Duke's Arrival. The horse's hooves thundered against the frozen ground, each impact jarring through Alistair Ravenshaw's body as he urged the beast faster through the blinding storm. Snow whipped across his face, stinging his eyes, but he didn't slow, couldn't slow. "Your Grace," his coachman's voice barely carried over the howling wind. "We must turn back. The storm." "Keep going," Alistair shouted, leaning low over his mount's neck. "She's out here somewhere. I know it." 8 months. He had been searching for Lady Eveline Harrow for 8 months, ever since his father's deathbed confession had shattered everything Alistair thought he knew about honor and duty. The memory rose unbidden, sharp and painful even now. Late April. The bedchamber had been thick with the smell of laudanum and approaching death. His father, the Duke of Ravenshaw, a man Alistair had respected above all others, had gripped his hand with surprising strength. "Alistair." His voice had been a rasp, barely audible. "I failed him, failed them both. Father, save your strength. No, you must know, must, make it right." His father's eyes, once so sharp, had been clouded with pain and regret. "Lord Thomas Harrow, my dearest friend, when he died, I promised to protect his daughter, little Eveline." Alistair had leaned closer. "What happened?" "Her mother married Cedric Harrow. A mistake. Thomas knew it, made me swear, made me guardian of a trust for Eveline, to be released when she turned 21. His father had coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "But Cedric, he's stolen it, stolen everything, and I was too weak, too ill to stop him. Where is she now?" "Still at Harrow Estate, under his control. She'll be 21 soon when the trust activates. Find her, son. Right my failure. She's in danger." Those had been among his father's last coherent words. 3 days later, he was gone. Alistair had begun searching immediately, quietly at first, hiring investigators, making discreet inquiries. What they uncovered had turned his blood cold. Lady Eveline Harrow was alive, but barely. Cedric kept her isolated, practically imprisoned. Servants whispered of abuse, starvation, cruelty, but no one would testify. No one dared cross Lord Cedric Harrow. So Alistair had planted an informant, a footman loyal to coin rather than cruelty. And this morning, the urgent message had arrived. "He means to kill her." She asked questions about her inheritance. "He's moving tonight." Alistair had ridden out immediately, racing the storm and his own fear that he would arrive too late. The wind shifted, and for a moment, the curtain of snow parted. That's when he saw it, a dark shape against the white, too small to be a fallen log, too still to be an animal. His heart stopped. "There." He yanked his horse toward the shape, half falling from the saddle before the animal had fully stopped. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands shaking as he turned her over gently. The face that met his gaze made his breath catch. He had seen her portrait, a miniature her father had given his own father years ago, but the painting hadn't captured this. Even unconscious, even with her lips blue and her skin deathly pale, she was breathtaking. Delicate features, dark lashes against ashen cheeks, a face that somehow still held traces of dignity despite everything she had endured. This is her, this is Eveline. But it was more than recognition that struck him. Something shifted in his chest, something unexpected and fierce. A pull he couldn't name, didn't have time to examine. She wasn't breathing. "No," the word tore from him. "No, you don't get to die. Not when I just found you." He ripped off his heavy cloak and wrapped it around her, then lifted her against his chest. She weighed almost nothing, her body frighteningly light in his arms. "I've been searching for you," he said, his voice rough with emotion he didn't understand. "You're safe now. I promise you're safe." He carried her to his horse, calling out to his coachman, "Get the carriage, now." The vehicle appeared through the snow, and Alistair climbed in without waiting for the steps, still cradling Eveline in his arms. "Your Grace, is she?" "Alive. Barely." He arranged her on the seat, wrapping his cloak tighter around her shivering form. Her lips were moving, but no sound emerged. "Get us to Ravenshaw," Alistair commanded, "as fast as the horses can manage." He rubbed her hands between his own, trying to force warmth back into her frozen fingers. They were bleeding, he realized with a surge of fury. Cut and cracked from the cold. What kind of monster threw a woman into a storm to die? Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Am I dead?" The whisper was so faint he almost missed it. "No." He brought her hands to his chest, willing his warmth into her. "You're very much alive, and I intend to keep you that way." Her eyes closed again, but he felt her fingers curl slightly against his waistcoat, holding on. The carriage lurched forward, racing through the storm. Ravenshaw appeared through the snow like a fortress, all stone and lamplight. Before the carriage had fully stopped, Alistair was out, carrying Eveline in his arms. The front doors flew open. Mrs. Pemberton, his housekeeper, stood with her husband, the butler, both their faces creased with concern. "Merciful heavens!" Mrs. Pemberton rushed forward. "Your Grace." "Who?" "Lady Eveline Harrow," Alistair said, striding past them toward the stairs. "She's half frozen. Get blankets, hot water, and send for Dr. Hartford immediately." "Of course, Your Grace." Mrs. Pemberton hurried alongside him. "The blue room has a fire already laid." "Perfect. And Mrs. Pemberton, no one is to know she's here." "Not yet." The housekeeper's eyes sharpened with understanding. "As you say, Your Grace." Alistair carried Eveline to the blue room, laying her gently on the bed. Her breathing was shallow, her skin still deathly pale. He shouldn't be here. Propriety demanded he leave her to the female servants, but he couldn't make himself go. "Your Grace." Mrs. Pemberton appeared with an armful of blankets. "We need to get her out of these wet things." Alistair finally stepped back, though everything in him rebelled against leaving her. "I'll be just outside. Send word the moment Dr. Hartford arrives." He paced the hallway like a caged animal, his mind racing. She was here. After 8 months of searching, countless dead ends, mounting frustration, he had found her. But the condition she was in, his hands clenched into fists. Cedric Harrow would answer for this. Every bruise, every scar, every moment of suffering. "Your Grace." A footman appeared, breathless. "Dr. Hartford has arrived." Alistair met the physician at the door to the blue room. Dr. Hartford was an older man with kind eyes and steady hands. "What have we here?" he asked, setting down his bag. "Exposure, possible frostbite. She was left in the storm to die." Alistair's voice was ice. "Save her. I'll do my best, Your Grace." The examination seemed to take hours. Alistair stood by the window, his back rigid, listening to the doctor's murmured assessments and Mrs. Pemberton's soft responses. Finally, Dr. Hartford emerged, wiping his hands. "Well?" Alistair demanded. "She'll live." The doctor's expression was grave. "But it was a near thing, Your Grace. Frostbite on her fingers and toes, we'll know in a few days if she'll keep them all. Malnourishment, dehydration, and evidence of repeated physical abuse over an extended period." Something dark and dangerous unfurled in Alistair's chest. Repeated abuse? Old bruises, healed fractures, scars. Dr. Hartford met his eyes. "This young woman has been systematically brutalized for some time. Months, perhaps years." Alistair's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. "But she'll survive. She's stronger than she looks. With proper care, warmth, and food, she should make a full recovery. Though the emotional wounds..." He shook his head. "Those will take longer to heal." "Thank you, Doctor. Send your bill to my steward." After Dr. Hartford departed, Alistair stationed a footman outside Eveline's door. "No one enters without my permission," he ordered, "especially no one claiming to be family. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Grace." Alistair should go to his own chambers, change from his wet clothes, rest. But instead, he found himself pushing open the door to the blue room one more time. Mrs. Pemberton had settled Eveline under a mountain of blankets. Her dark hair had been dried and braided, lying over one shoulder. Her face, cleaned of dirt and blood, was painfully young, peaceful in sleep. Finally, he moved to the bedside, looking down at her. 8 months he had searched. 8 months of following cold trails and dead ends, driven by his father's dying wish and his own sense of duty. But seeing her now, knowing what she had endured, he realized this had become something more than duty. Cedric Harrow had tried to destroy her, had starved her, beaten her, thrown her into a storm to die, and she had survived. Alistair reached out, stopping just short of touching her hand where it rested on the blanket. Her fingers were bandaged now, wrapped carefully by Mrs. Pemberton. "You're safe now," he said softly. "I give you my word, he'll never hurt you again." He didn't know if she could hear him, didn't know if she would even remember this moment when she woke. But he made the promise anyway, to her, to his father's memory, to himself. Cedric Harrow's reign of cruelty was over, and Alistair Ravenshaw would make certain he paid for every moment of suffering he had inflicted. Chapter 3. Awakening to Questions. Warmth. That was the first thing Eveline noticed as consciousness slowly returned. Warmth surrounding her, cocooning her, seeping into bones that had known nothing but cold for so long. Her eyes fluttered open to soft morning light, filtering through curtains of deep blue velvet. She blinked, confused, her mind struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. A ceiling painted with delicate plasterwork, walls papered in cream silk with subtle gold threading, a fire crackling merrily in an ornate marble fireplace, and the bed, merciful heavens, the bed. She was lying on linen so fine they felt like water against her skin, beneath a coverlet of quilted silk that must have cost more than everything she had owned in the past 2 years combined. The scent of lavender hung in the air, subtle and soothing. Where am I? She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through her hands, her feet, her ribs. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. "Easy now, my lady." A gentle voice came from beside the bed. "You've been through quite an ordeal." Eveline turned her head slowly this time to find a woman sitting in a chair nearby. She was perhaps 50, with kind eyes and greying hair tucked neatly beneath a pristine white cap. Her dress marked her as upper staff, a housekeeper perhaps. Where?" Eveline's voice came out as a croak, her throat raw and painful. "Here." The woman poured water from a pitcher into a glass, helping Eveline drink. The cool liquid was pure bliss. Small sips now. That's it. When Eveline had drunk her fill, she tried again. "Where am I?" "Ravenshaw Estate, my lady. I'm Mrs. Pemberton, the housekeeper." The woman set the glass aside and adjusted Eveline's pillows with practiced efficiency. "His Grace, the Duke of Ravenshaw, brought you here 3 days ago. You've been sleeping, which is exactly what you needed." 3 days, Eveline's mind reeled. The last thing she remembered was the storm, the cold, the certainty that she was dying. And then, a voice, strong arms, warmth. "I've been searching for you." "The Duke," she whispered. He saved me." "That he did." Mrs. Pemberton's expression softened. "Found you in that terrible storm and rode through it, like the devil himself was chasing him, to get you home safe." Home. The word felt foreign, impossible. This couldn't be real. Any moment now, she would wake in her cold attic room, hunger gnawing at her belly, and realize this had all been a beautiful, cruel dream. "I've brought you breakfast, Mrs." Pemberton lifted a tray from a nearby table, settling it across Eveline's lap. "Dr. Hartford said you're to eat slowly, mind. Your stomach needs time to adjust." Eveline stared at the tray. Toast with butter, soft boiled eggs, porridge with honey, tea that smelled of bergamot, real food, more food than she had seen in months. Her hands shook as she reached for the toast, then stopped. Her fingers were wrapped in bandages. "Frostbite, Mrs." Pemberton explained gently. "Not severe, thank the heavens. Dr. Hartford believes you'll keep all your fingers, though they'll be tender for some time." Eveline touched the bandages carefully, memory flooding back. The storm, her bleeding hands clutching at nothing. The cold that had stolen all feeling. She had been dying. She should be dead. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why would the Duke of Ravenshaw save me? I'm nobody. I have nothing. Mrs. Pemberton's expression grew careful, measured. "His Grace has been searching for you for months, my lady. He'll explain everything when you're stronger. For now, you need to eat and regain your strength." Searching for her? For months? None of this made sense. But the food before her was real enough, and her stomach cramped with desperate hunger. She forced herself to eat slowly, though every instinct screamed at her to devour it all. The toast was soft, the butter rich, the eggs were perfectly cooked. Even the simple porridge tasted like heaven. She ate until Mrs. Pemberton gently removed the tray, declaring she'd had enough for now. "There's a mirror on the dressing table, if you'd like to freshen up," the housekeeper said. "I'll return shortly to help you wash and change your bandages." After Mrs. Pemberton left, Eveline carefully swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her feet were bandaged too, she noticed, and tender when she put weight on them. But she could stand, could walk, albeit slowly, to the dressing table. The face that looked back at her from the mirror was almost unrecognizable. She had always been slender, but now she was gaunt, her cheekbones sharp, her eyes too large in her hollow face. A bruise mottled her left cheek yellow-green now, fading but still visible. Her lip was split, though healing. Her neck bore the shadow of finger marks, evidence of what she had survived, evidence of what Cedric had done. But beneath the bruises and the thinness, she was still herself. Her eyes, at least, looked different than they had 3 days ago. There was something in them that hadn't been there in the snow. Hope, perhaps, or simply the stubborn refusal to die. A knock at the door made her turn. "My lady, Mrs." Pemberton's voice came through the wood. "His Grace requests permission to call on you, if you're feeling strong enough. I can send him away, if you'd prefer to rest." Eveline's heart hammered. The Duke, the man who had saved her life, who had apparently been searching for her, though she couldn't fathom why. She should refuse, should rest, as Mrs. Pemberton suggested. But the questions burning in her mind wouldn't wait. "I'll see him," she said, then added quickly, "but perhaps you could help me first. I don't wish to receive him looking quite so." "Of course, my lady." 20 minutes later, Eveline sat in a chair by the fire in the drawing room, dressed in a borrowed morning gown of soft grey wool. Mrs. Pemberton had helped her wash and rebraid her hair, and though she still looked pale and bruised, she felt more herself. The door opened, and he entered. Eveline's breath caught. She had a vague impression from the storm, a strong face, intense eyes, but seeing him clearly now was something else entirely. The Duke of Ravenshaw was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes the colour of steel. His face was all strong lines and sharp angles, handsome in a way that was almost severe. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to command. But it was his eyes that struck her. They held an intensity that should have been frightening, yet somehow wasn't. "Lady Harrow," he bowed, formal and correct. "I'm glad to see you awake and recovering." "Your Grace." She tried to stand, but he waved her back down. "Please, don't. You're still healing." He took a chair across from her, leaving a proper distance between them. "How are you feeling?" "Confused," she admitted. "Grateful. Overwhelmed. Mrs. Pemberton said you've been searching for me?" He nodded. "For 8 months. 8 months." The words hung in the air between them. "Why?" The question came out more blunt than she intended. "Forgive me, Your Grace, but I don't understand. Why would you search for me? I'm nobody. The stepdaughter of a minor lord, with no fortune. No. You're not nobody." His voice was firm. "And you do have a fortune. Or rather, you should have." Eveline stared at him. "I don't understand." He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "My father and yours were close friends. Very close. When your father died 12 years ago, he made mine guardian of a trust established for you, to be released when you turned 21. Her heart began to pound. "A trust?" "Your father's estate, Willowmere, a modest but prosperous manor about 30 miles from here, investments in several profitable ventures, and a substantial sum set aside for your future." Alistair's jaw tightened. "Cedric Harrow knew about it. He was appointed your guardian until you came of age, at which point he was legally required to turn over your inheritance." The room seemed to tilt. "I have an estate? An inheritance?" "You do. Willowmere was your father's pride and joy. He wanted you to have security, independence, a life of your own choosing." Eveline's hands trembled in her lap. "But why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't your father?" "My father became ill several years ago." Pain flickered across Alistair's face. By the time he realized Cedric was abusing his guardianship, he was too weak to intervene. It haunted him until his death 6 months ago. His last words to me were a confession of his failure and a plea that I right his wrong. "So you searched for me out of duty." The words came out flat, hollow. "Of course. Why else would a duke care about her fate? I searched for you because you deserve justice." Alistair's eyes met hers, unflinching. "Because my father's failure doesn't excuse my inaction. And because," he paused, "because no one should suffer what you've endured." Eveline looked away, uncomfortable with the sympathy in his gaze. "How did you find me in the storm?" "I had someone watching Cedric's estate, a footman loyal to coin rather than cruelty." His voice hardened. "When word came that Cedric had discovered your letter to your father's solicitor, that he planned to move against you, I rode out immediately. I tracked his carriage, found where his men threw you out." His hands clenched on the arms of his chair. "They'll answer for that. All of them." The certainty in his voice sent a shiver through her. "Not fear, exactly. Something else. But I still don't understand." She met his eyes again, searching for answers. "Why do you care? You don't know me. This inheritance, surely the trust could have been transferred through legal channels, through solicitors. You didn't have to risk your life in a storm to... You would have been dead before the solicitors finished their paperwork. The words were blunt, brutal. Cedric was destroying you systematically, hoping you'd die before you turned 21 so he could claim everything through legal maneuvering. My father knew that. I know that. He leaned forward. I won't fail as he did. You deserve justice. You deserve your inheritance. You deserve to live. The intensity in his voice, in his eyes, took her breath away. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this wasn't some elaborate scheme, that this impossible salvation was real. But trust was a luxury she had learned to live without. What do you want from me in return? She asked quietly. Alistair blinked, clearly surprised by the question. Nothing. Everyone wants something. Not from you, his voice gentled. Lady Harrow, Eveline, you've been hurt, betrayed, nearly murdered. I understand why you're wary. But I give you my word as a gentleman that I want nothing from you except to see you reclaim what is rightfully yours. She studied his face, looking for deception, for the hidden trap. But all she saw was sincerity. And something else, a fierce protectiveness that both unsettled and comforted her. Slowly, carefully, she allowed herself to nod. What happens now? Relief flickered across his features. Now, you rest and recover your strength. When you're ready, we'll begin the process of reclaiming your inheritance. I have solicitors gathering evidence of Cedric's malfeasance. We'll need your testimony as well, when you're strong enough to give it. And then Willowmere is yours. Your life is yours. You'll be free to choose your own path. Free. The word sounded like a dream, beautiful and impossible. I should let you rest. Alistair stood, and Eveline rose as well, though her legs trembled slightly. If you need anything at all, Mrs. Pemberton has instructions to provide it. You're safe here, Eveline. I promise you that. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. There's one more thing you should know. The solicitor you wrote to Mr. Pembroke, he was your father's man. Loyal and trustworthy. When you're ready, I'll arrange for you to meet with him. He has documents your father left for you. Documents? Letters, I believe, and the full details of your inheritance. Alistair's expression softened. Your father loved you very much. He wanted to ensure you were provided for, protected. He chose my father as trustee because they were brothers in all but blood. That trust was misplaced in the end, but the intent was pure. Tears pricked at Eveline's eyes. She barely remembered her father, she had been so young when he died. But knowing he had thought of her, planned for her, cared enough to try to secure her future. Thank you, she whispered, for telling me, for saving me, for all of this. You're welcome, he bowed slightly. Rest well, Lady Harrow. After he left, Eveline returned to her chair by the fire, her mind whirling with everything she had learned. An inheritance, an estate called Willowmere, freedom. It seemed impossible, too good to be true. And yet, looking around at the elegant room, feeling the warmth of the fire, tasting the lingering sweetness of honey on her tongue, this was real. She was here. She was alive. For the first time in 2 years, perhaps for the first time in her life, the future stretched before her with possibility rather than dread. Outside the window, snow fell gently, soft white flakes drifting down like blessings, so different from the killing storm that had nearly claimed her. Eveline pressed her bandaged hand to the cool glass and allowed herself, finally, to hope. Chapter 4. Secrets in the Library. The library at Ravenshaw became Eveline's sanctuary. A week had passed since she woke in the blue bedroom, a week of careful healing and quiet discovery. The frostbite on her fingers and toes had begun to fade, the bandages replaced with lighter wrappings, her bruises had shifted from purple to yellow-green, and the hollow look in her face had softened as Mrs. Pemberton plied her with nourishing meals. But it was the library that truly restored her. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, filled with more books than she had seen in her entire life. The scent of leather and old paper wrapped around her like an embrace. Tall windows let in the winter sunlight, and a fire always burned in the marble fireplace, keeping the room warm and welcoming. She spent hours there, curled in a wingback chair with volume after volume. Poetry, history, philosophy, novels she had never been allowed to read. Each book was a gift, a reminder that the world was larger than the attic room where Cedric had kept her prisoner. Alistair often worked there too, She would arrive to find him already seated at the massive oak desk, reviewing correspondence or consulting with his steward. At first, his presence had made her nervous, uncertain, but he never pressed for conversation, never demanded her attention. They simply existed together in companionable silence, and somehow, that was enough. Small moments began to accumulate between them like snowflakes building into drifts. She noticed he took his tea without sugar, just a splash of milk. The next afternoon, when she prepared her own cup from the service Mrs. Pemberton left for them, she prepared his as well without asking. He had looked up, surprise flickering across his face, then offered a small smile of thanks. He noticed she favored her left hand, the frostbite having been worse on her right. Without comment, he began moving books and teacups closer to her left side when she sat down. She pretended not to notice, but warmth bloomed in her chest each time. They discussed books occasionally, brief exchanges about a passage that moved her, a historical detail he found interesting. His knowledge was vast, but he never condescended. Instead, he listened when she spoke, truly listened, as if her thoughts mattered. It was such a small thing, but after years of being dismissed, ignored, treated as less than nothing, it meant everything. On the 8th day, Alistair was closeted with his steward, reviewing the estate accounts. Eveline wandered deeper into the library than she had before, drawn by curiosity and the restless energy of improving health. In the far corner, half hidden behind a globe on a brass stand, she found an old writing desk. It was beautiful walnut, with inlaid mother of pearl, clearly an heirloom. One of the small drawers sat slightly ajar, as if someone had closed it carelessly. She shouldn't pry. This was Alistair's home, his private space. But something drew her forward. Her fingers touched the drawer, and it slid open easily. Inside lay bundles of letters, tied with faded ribbon. Her breath caught when she saw the seal pressed into the wax a stag's head, her father's seal. With shaking hands, she lifted out the first bundle. The top letter was addressed to Edmund Ravenshaw, Duke of Ravenshaw, in her father's bold hand. She recognized it from the few documents she had seen as a child, before everything changed. She carried the letters to the nearest chair, her heart hammering. She shouldn't read someone else's correspondence, but these were from her father, about her father. Surely that gave her some right. She untied the ribbon and began to read. My dearest Edmund, Eveline turns 5 today. She insisted we have strawberry tarts for tea, though the season is long past. You know how persuasive she can be when she sets her mind to something. She has her mother's determination and, I fear, my stubborn streak. Heaven help us both. I've been thinking much on our pact, old friend. Should anything happen to me, I trust you will watch over her as if she were your own. Tears blurred Eveline's vision. She blinked them away and read on. Letter after letter revealed the depth of friendship between her father and the late Duke. They had been like brothers, closer than many bound by blood. They had fought together, celebrated together, mourned together when Alistair's mother died in childbirth. And they had made a pact to protect each other's children should tragedy strike. Eveline's hands trembled as she reached the final bundle. These letters were newer, written in the last year of her father's life. His handwriting had grown shakier, his health clearly failing. Edmund, the doctors give me 6 months at most. Margaret is inconsolable, though she tries to hide it. I worry most for Eveline. She is only 9, too young to lose her father. I've named you guardian of her trust, as we discussed. Willowmere, the investments, everything. It's all to go to her when she reaches her majority. Margaret will remarry, I'm certain. She's too young to remain a widow, and I would not wish that loneliness upon her. But Edmund, I must ask this of you. Watch over my girl. Her stepfather, whoever he may be, will have guardianship until she turns 21. But you will control the money. Be vigilant, my friend. Protect her as I cannot. Your brother in all but blood, Thomas. Eveline pressed the letter to her chest, grief washing over her. Her father had tried to protect her, had made arrangements, set up safeguards, but something had still gone terribly wrong. She dug deeper into the drawer and found what she was looking for, a rolled parchment sealed with wax. Her father's will. Her hands shook so badly she could barely break the seal. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. All properties, investments, and moneys to pass to Lady Eveline Harrow upon her 21st birthday. Lord Cedric Harrow, named guardian until said date, to receive an annual stipend of £500 for her care, education, and maintenance. £500 every year for her care, and Cedric had starved her, beaten her, kept her in rags. Rage joined her grief, hot and bitter. But there was more. Tucked into the will was a sealed letter, the wax unbroken, addressed in her father's hand, to Lady Eveline Harrow, to be opened on her 21st birthday. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. My dearest Eveline, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you have reached your majority. I wish I could be there to see the woman you've become, but I must content myself with knowing you in my heart. First, know this. You are my greatest joy. Every moment with you has been a blessing. You are clever, kind, and strong, everything your mother and I hoped for, and more. I must warn you about Lord Cedric Harrow. He is your mother's choice, not mine, and while I hope I am wrong, I do not trust him fully. He is ambitious and fond of cards, two traits that rarely bode well. This is why I've placed your inheritance in the care of my dearest friend, Edmund Ravenshaw. If you face any difficulty, go to the Duke. He will help you. This I know with certainty. Willowmere awaits you, my darling girl, your father's house, now yours. Walk its halls and know that you are loved. Tend its gardens and know that you are cherished. Live the life of your own choosing. Never doubt your worth. You are a Harrow, daughter of a long line of good, honest people. You need no title, no grand connections to prove your value. You are enough, exactly as you are. Live fully, Eveline. Love deeply. Be happy. Your devoted father, Thomas Harrow. The sob tore from her throat before she could stop it. Then another and another, until she was weeping into her hands, the letter clutched against her heart. He had loved her, had thought of her, planned for her, tried to protect her even from beyond the grave. And she barely remembered him. Just fragments, a deep laugh, strong hands lifting her onto his shoulders, the scratch of his beard when he kissed her goodnight. All those years she thought herself alone, unloved, unwanted, and here was proof that she had been cherished, that her father had tried to secure her future, had worried about her, had known she was worthy of love and protection. Cedric had stolen that from her, had stolen everything. Eveline? She looked up to find Alistair standing in the doorway, concern etched across his features. She must look a mess, tear-stained and red-eyed, clutching letters like a lifeline. He crossed the room quickly, kneeling beside her chair. What happened? Are you hurt? She couldn't speak, could only shake her head and thrust the letters at him. He took them carefully, his eyes scanning the pages. She watched his expression shift from concern to understanding to cold fury. £500 a year, he said, his voice like iron. Cedric received £500 annually for your care and education, substantial funds, and he starved you, beat you, left you to die in a storm. Why? The word came out broken. Why would he do this? Alistair set down the letters and met her eyes. There's something else you should know, something I learned during my investigation. He paused, as if weighing his words. Cedric has a gambling problem. Debts across London to moneylenders, gaming hells, places no gentleman should frequent. He's been using your guardian's stipend to pay them. Understanding crashed over her like a wave. When I turned 21, the money would stop, and you would gain Willowmere and the full inheritance. He would lose his source of income and any claim to your father's estate. Alistair's jaw clenched. He'd lose everything. So he tried to kill me, she said it calmly, though rage burned in her chest. Not just cruelty, not just abuse. He was planning it, destroying me slowly, hoping I'd die before I came of age. Yes, the word hung between them, heavy with truth. Eveline looked down at her father's letter, his words blurring through fresh tears. Never doubt your worth. Your father failed his promise, she said quietly. You mentioned that before. What did you mean? Pain flickered across Alistair's face. He stood, moving to the window, his back to her. He knew Cedric was misusing the funds. He hired investigators about 3 years ago when he began to suspect. They discovered everything, the gambling, the abuse, the way you were being treated. Then why didn't he stop it? He tried. Alistair's voice was rough. But he was already ill by then, and Cedric has powerful friends, connections in society and the courts. My father was advised that a public accusation without ironclad proof could backfire, could make things worse for you. So he gathered evidence, built a case. But his illness progressed faster than expected. He died before he could act. He turned to face her. His last words were regret for not saving you sooner. for failing his promise to your father. Eveline absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. So you're fulfilling his promise? Yes. He crossed back to her, his eyes intense. But Eveline, it's become more than duty. The air between them seemed to thicken. She could feel her heart beating, loud in her ears. More than duty, she whispered. He knelt again, his face level with hers. When I found you in that storm, when I thought you might die, he stopped, swallowed hard. This stopped being about my father's guilt or my family's honor. You're not an obligation to discharge. He seemed to struggle for words. You matter, to me. Something warm unfurled in her chest, fragile and new. What will we do? She asked softly. His expression hardened with determination. We gather evidence. We bring Cedric before the magistrate. And we get you, Willowmere. We get you everything that's rightfully yours. We? If you'll have my help. She looked at him, this man who had searched for her, saved her, given her shelter and safety and hope. This man who knelt before her now, offering not rescue but partnership. For the first time since she could remember, she wasn't alone. Yes, she said firmly. We do this together. His hand found hers, her left hand, the less damaged one, and squeezed gently. Together, he agreed. And in that moment, surrounded by her father's words and this man's quiet strength, Eveline felt something shift inside her. She was no longer just surviving. She was ready to fight. Chapter 5. Uncovering the Past. 2 weeks had transformed Eveline in ways she hadn't thought possible. The bandages were gone from her fingers and toes, replaced by healthy pink skin that was still tender but healing. Her face had filled out with Mrs. Pemberton's careful feeding, the bruises faded to nothing, the hollow look in her eyes replaced by something brighter. She could walk without pain now, could hold a book without her hands cramping, could look in the mirror and see herself rather than a ghost. But physical recovery was only part of the battle. In the estate office, Alistair's solicitor, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Whitmore, spread documents across the mahogany desk like a general planning a campaign. The guardianship records are damning enough, he said, adjusting his spectacles. Lord Cedric received £500 annually for Lady Harrow's care, yet there are no records of expenses for her education, clothing, or medical care. Nothing. Eveline stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. Alistair sat at the desk, his expression grim. What about the bank statements? He asked. Even more revealing, Mr. Whitmore produced a ledger, withdrawals matching known gambling debts, payments to moneylenders. The pattern is unmistakable. He used the guardian stipend to fund his vices, while keeping Lady Harrow in what amounts to imprisonment. And the witness statements? 3 former servants willing to testify to the abuse they witnessed. A cook, a scullery maid, and a groom, all dismissed by Lord Cedric when they showed Lady Harrow kindness. Mr. Whitmore frowned. It's substantial evidence, Your Grace, but a clever barrister might argue these are disgruntled servants seeking revenge. We need something irrefutable, Alistair said. Eveline turned from the window, a thought crystallizing. My mother's belongings. Both men looked at her. When Cedric moved me to the attic room 2 years ago, he cleared out my mother's chambers. He threw everything away, said it was clutter, reminders of weakness. Her voice hardened. But Mary, the lady's maid, she was kind to me when she dared. She might have saved something. Alistair stood immediately. Mary still works at the Harrow estate? She did, last I knew. She risked his wrath more than once to sneak me extra food. Eveline met his eyes. If anyone would have hidden something away, it would be her. Mr. Whitmore, can we approach her discreetly? The solicitor nodded. I'll send one of your trusted footmen, someone who won't draw attention. 3 days later, a small trunk arrived at Ravenshaw. Eveline stood in her room, staring at it as if it might bite. It was smaller than she remembered, battered leather with tarnished brass fittings. Mary's note, delivered with it, was brief. My lady, I saved what I could when he ordered everything burned. I'm sorry it's not more. We all hoped you'd come back to claim it someday. Your loyal servant, Mary. Would you like me to stay? Alistair asked from the doorway. He had carried the trunk up himself, refusing to let the servants handle it. Eveline shook her head. I need to do this alone. But don't go far. I'll be in the library. His voice was gentle. Call if you need me. After he left, Eveline knelt before the trunk and lifted the lid with trembling hands. The scent hit her first lavender and rosewater, her mother's signature fragrance. For a moment, She was 9 years old again, climbing into her mother's lap, breathing in that comforting smell. On top lay her mother's jewelry box. Evelyn opened it to find paste copies of the pieces. She remembered the real gems long since sold, she was certain. Beneath that, a silk shawl embroidered with roses, a prayer book with gilt edges, a miniature portrait of Evelyn as a child. Each item was a memory, a fragment of a life before everything turned dark. And then, hidden in the lining of the trunk, her fingers found something else, a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. She unwrapped it carefully to reveal letters, dozens of them, tied with ribbon, her mother's handwriting. Evelyn spread the letters across her bed, organizing them by date. Most were addressed to her mother's sister, Aunt Catherine, who had died 5 years ago. But there were others too, drafts of letters never sent, entries that read more like journal confessions. She began to read. "Dearest Catherine, I've discovered something terrible. Cedric has been stealing from Evelyn's trust. I found bank statements hidden in his study withdrawals that don't match what he claims to spend on our household. He's gambling, Catherine, heavily." The letter was dated 6 months after her father's death. Another, a year later. "He knows I know. I confronted him, and he threatened me. Said if I went to the Duke or tried to leave, he would have me declared mad and institutionalized. You know how easy that is for a husband, Catherine. I would lose Evelyn entirely. At least this way, I can protect her as best I can." Evelyn's hands shook as she continued reading. The letters painted a picture she had never seen. Her mother wasn't the weak, passive woman Cedric had described. She had been trapped, terrified, but fighting in the only ways available to her. She had documented everything: dates when Cedric struck her, amounts he stole, witnesses to his cruelty. She had been building a case, gathering evidence, hoping to use it to protect Evelyn when the time came. But she never got the chance. The later letters showed her mother's declining health. "Catherine, I grow weaker each day. Cedric insists the doctor's medicine will help, but I only feel worse after taking it. Sometimes I wonder." Evelyn's breath caught. Had Cedric poisoned her? Slowly, subtly, making it look like natural illness. She would never know for certain. But the suspicion settled in her chest like a stone. The final letter was unsealed, addressed simply, "To my darling Evelyn," in a shaky hand. "My dearest girl, if you are reading this, I am gone, and I have failed you. Forgive me for my weakness. I tried to protect you but could not find the strength to leave, to fight hard enough. You are stronger than I ever was. I see it in you, your father's courage, his determination. Do not let Cedric break you as he broke me. Fight, my darling. Live. The evidence I've gathered is here. Use it. Seek out the Duke of Ravenshaw. He was your father's dearest friend. He will help you if I cannot. Know that every moment with you has been my greatest joy. You are loved, Evelyn. Never doubt that. Your mother." The sob tore from Evelyn's chest before she could stop it. Then another and another, until she was weeping into the letters, her whole body shaking with the force of her grief. Not grief for what she had lost, she had mourned that years ago, but grief for what her mother had endured, for the fear she had lived with, the impossible choices she had faced, for the love that had been there all along, hidden beneath layers of terror and helplessness. Her mother hadn't abandoned her, hadn't been weak or complicit. She had been trapped, just as Evelyn had been, and she had tried, in the only ways she could, to protect her daughter. Evelyn didn't hear the door open, didn't register Alistair's presence until his arms came around her, strong and steady. "I've got you," he murmured, pulling her against his chest. "I've got you." She turned into him, clutching his waistcoat as she wept. For her mother, for herself, for all the years of suffering that could have been prevented if anyone had listened, had cared, had acted. But Alistair was acting now, was caring now. And for the first time since her mother's death, Evelyn wasn't alone in her grief. She cried until she had no tears left, until her body was exhausted and her throat raw. Through it all, Alistair simply held her, one hand stroking her hair, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of her emotions. When the tears finally subsided, she pulled back slightly, embarrassed by the wet patch on his waistcoat. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be." His hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing away the remaining tears. "Don't ever apologize for feeling." She looked up at him, really looked at him. The strong jaw, the intense grey eyes that saw too much, the mouth that was usually so stern but could soften with such gentleness. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for saving me, for believing me. for helping me, for being here. Eveline. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. Something flickered in his eyes, heat, longing, something that made her breath catch. She saw it clearly now. He cared for her, not just as a duty or obligation, but as a woman, as herself. The air between them thickened with possibility. He was so close. It would be so easy to close the distance, to seek comfort in his kiss, to lose herself in the promise of his touch. But even as desire stirred in her chest, something else held her back. She needed to be whole first, needed to reclaim herself, her identity, her strength. She couldn't come to him or anyone from a place of need and vulnerability. That wouldn't be fair to either of them. She pulled back gently, putting space between them. I need to be whole again before I can. I need to reclaim myself first. Disappointment flickered across his face, but understanding followed quickly. I'll wait, he said simply, as long as it takes. She reached up, touching his face briefly, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I'm beginning to think I was meant to freeze in that storm so you could find me. His hand covered hers, pressing it against his cheek. You were meant to survive. Everything else is just us choosing each other. The words hung between them, not a kiss, but a promise. Something deeper than passion, more enduring than desire. When he finally stepped back, Eveline felt the loss of his warmth, but also a strange rightness. This was how it should be. Honest, patient, built on choice rather than circumstance. The letters, she said, gesturing to the bed. My mother documented everything. Dates, amounts, witnesses. It's all here. Alistair's expression shifted back to determination. May I? She nodded, and together they reviewed her mother's careful evidence. Bank records copied in her mother's hand. Names of servants who had witnessed Cedric's cruelty. Detailed accounts of his violence and theft. With this and what Mr. Whitmore has gathered, Alistair said, we have everything we need. What do we do now? He met her eyes, and she saw the strategist beneath the gentleman. We summon Cedric here. Make him think you're willing to negotiate, perhaps sign away some of your inheritance in exchange for being left alone. Then we confront him with the magistrate present. Will he come? If he thinks he can manipulate you into giving up Willowmere? Absolutely. A grim smile touched Alistair's lips. His arrogance is his weakness. He'll assume you're still the frightened girl he kept in the attic. He won't expect the woman you've become. Eveline felt something fierce kindle in her chest. Then let's set the trap. Alistair nodded, but before he turned to leave, he caught her hand one more time. You're not alone in this, Eveline. Whatever happens, we face it together. Together, she agreed. And as she watched him leave to begin the preparations, Eveline looked down at her mother's letters one more time. Fight, my darling. Live. She had survived the storm, survived Cedric's cruelty, survived everything meant to break her. Now it was time to fight back. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. Eveline stood before the mirror in her room, barely recognizing the woman who looked back at her. The gown Alistair had commissioned was simple but elegant deep blue wool, with delicate embroidery at the cuffs and collar. It fit perfectly, tailored to her recovering frame. Mrs. Pemberton had arranged her hair in a simple chignon, with soft curls framing her face. She looked like a lady, like someone with worth, like someone who deserved an inheritance. But her hands trembled as she smoothed the fabric over her skirts. He's coming, she whispered to her reflection. Cedric is coming here. A knock at the door made her jump. Eveline? Alistair's voice, steady and calm. May I come in? Yes. He entered, closing the door behind him. His expression softened when he saw her. You look beautiful. And strong. I don't feel strong. I feel terrified. He crossed to her, taking her shaking hands in his. That's natural. But remember, you're not alone. I'll be right beside you. Mr. Whitmore has all the evidence. Sir William Thornbury and the constable are waiting in the adjoining room. Cedric is walking into a trap of his own making. What if something goes wrong? What if he won't hurt you again? I won't allow it. The fierce protectiveness in Alistair's voice steadied her. You've survived everything he's done to you. You've gathered evidence, built a case, reclaimed your voice. This is the final step. She nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. I can do this. I know you can. The formal drawing room at Ravenshaw was magnificent, all gilt furniture and crystal chandeliers, with portraits of Alistair's ancestors watching from the walls. Eveline stood near the fireplace, Alistair beside her, while Mr. Whitmore arranged documents on a side table. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. The clock on the mantel showed 11:30. Any moment now. The butler appeared in the doorway. "Lord Cedric Harrow, Your Grace." And there he was. Cedric swept into the room with his usual arrogance, his fashionable coat and polished boots marking him as a gentleman of means. But Eveline saw what she hadn't noticed before: the slight puffiness beneath his eyes, the red veins that spoke of too much drink, the tightness around his mouth that suggested barely controlled desperation. He was trapped, and on some level, he knew it. "My dear stepdaughter," his voice dripped with false concern as he rushed toward her. "Thank heavens you're alive. When you ran away in that terrible storm, I was beside myself with worry. I've had men searching for you everywhere. I didn't run away." Eveline's voice was steady, stronger than she expected. "Your men threw me from a carriage to die." Cedric's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of cold calculation in his eyes. Then it returned, all concerned guardian once more. "Nonsense. You're clearly confused, my dear. The fever from your ordeal must have—" "Enough." Alistair stepped forward, his presence commanding. "We know everything, Cedric." Cedric's eyes narrowed as he properly registered Alistair for the first time. "And who are you to interfere, Ravenshaw? This is a family matter, between a guardian and his ward. I'm the executor of the trust her father established, the trust you've been stealing from for years." A muscle twitched in Cedric's jaw. "Those are serious accusations. I hope you have proof to back them up, Your Grace, or I'll see you in court for slander." "Oh, we have proof." Alistair's smile was cold. "Mr. Whitmore?" The solicitor stepped forward, his arms full of documents. "Lord Cedric Harrow, as executor of Lord Thomas Harrow's estate, I'm formally charging you with embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of guardianship." He spread the documents across the table: bank records, witness statements, copies of the trust agreements. Cedric's face reddened. "Forgeries, all of it. The desperate ravings of a dead woman and a foolish girl who doesn't know her place. My mother wasn't dead when she wrote these." Eveline moved to the table, picked up one of her mother's letters. "She documented everything, Cedric. Every penny you stole, every time you struck her, every threat you made. Your mother was a weak, hysterical woman who you killed." The words came out flat, certain. "You poisoned her slowly, didn't you? Made it look like illness while you fed her medicine that made her sicker." Cedric's laugh was sharp, nervous. "Preposterous. You can't prove. You took everything from me." Eveline's voice grew stronger with each word. "My home, my inheritance, my dignity. You starved me, beat me, locked me away like I was nothing. And when I dared to ask questions about what was rightfully mine, you tried to murder me. You ungrateful wretch." The mask shattered completely. Cedric's face contorted with rage. "I fed you, housed you. You were a burden, just like your simpering mother. I should have." He stopped abruptly, realizing what he was about to say. But Eveline pressed forward, her fear transforming into fierce determination. "Should have what? Cedric? Killed her too? Is that what you were going to say?" His silence was answer enough. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Sir William," Alistair called, "I believe you've heard enough." The door to the adjoining room opened, and the magistrate entered with the constable behind him. Sir William Thornbury was a stern man with iron-grey hair and the bearing of someone who had seen too much corruption in his years. Cedric's face went white. "This is a trick, a conspiracy. This is justice," Sir William said coldly. "Lord Cedric Harrow, you are under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, abuse, and attempted murder." "You can't do this." Cedric looked wildly around the room. "I have friends, connections. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, we do." Mr. Whitmore produced another document. "Your creditors have been very forthcoming about your debts. Gambling establishments across London were quite eager to testify once they learned there might be funds recovered from your fraudulent activities." Cedric's eyes darted to the door. For a moment, Eveline thought he might try to run. Instead, he lunged, not toward the exit, but toward her. "If I can't have it, neither will you." Everything happened in a blur. Cedric's hand went to his coat, and suddenly there was a knife, small but deadly, glinting in the morning light. He grabbed Eveline's arm, yanking her against him, the blade pressing against her throat. She felt the cold metal, smelled his sweat and desperation, and for one terrible moment was back in the attic room, helpless and afraid. Then Alistair moved. He was faster than she would have thought possible for a man his size. One moment Cedric held her, the next Alistair's hand clamped around Cedric's wrist like a vice, wrenching it away with such force that the knife clattered to the floor. Cedric screamed as Alistair spun him around and slammed him against the wall. "You will never touch her again," Alistair said, his voice deadly quiet. "Do you understand me? Never." The constable rushed forward with chains, subduing Cedric while he struggled and cursed. "You think you've won?" Cedric spat at Eveline, venom in every word. "You're still nothing, a nobody, a merchant's daughter playing at nobility." Eveline looked at him, this man who had haunted her nightmares, who had made her life a living hell, and all she felt was pity. "No," she said quietly. "I'm my father's daughter, and that's enough." Something in her calm certainty seemed to break him. His struggles ceased, his shoulders slumped. "Take him away," Sir William ordered. The constable dragged Cedric toward the door, the chains rattling with each step. Even then, he couldn't stop ranting about injustice, about ungrateful stepchildren, about debts and desperate circumstances. His voice faded as they hauled him from the room and out of her life. The silence that followed was profound. Sir William approached Eveline, his stern expression softening slightly. "Lady Harrow, on behalf of the Crown, I apologize for the failure of justice that allowed this man to harm you for so long. Your inheritance will be restored immediately. I will personally oversee the transfer of Willowmere and all associated properties." "Thank you, Sir William." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. After the magistrate and Mr. Whitmore departed to handle the legal formalities, Eveline stood alone in the silent drawing room. The space felt too large suddenly, too empty. It was over. Cedric was arrested, her inheritance secured, justice served. So why did she feel so hollow? "Eveline?" Alistair's voice was gentle. "Are you all right?" She turned to him, trying to find words for the strange emptiness inside her. "I thought I'd feel triumphant, or at least relieved, but I just feel empty. He can't hurt me anymore, but he already took so much. I can't get those years back." Alistair crossed to her, his presence solid and reassuring. "No, you can't get them back, but you can build new ones." "Can I?" She looked up at him, suddenly uncertain. "I don't even know who I am without fear. For so long, I was just trying to survive, and now that I don't have to anymore, I don't know what comes next. Then we'll discover it together." He took her hands, his touch warm and steady. "If you'll let me." She wanted to lean into him, to let his strength carry her through this strange aftermath, but something held her back, the same instinct that had pulled her away from his kiss before. She needed to find herself first, needed to understand who Eveline Harrow was when she wasn't defined by suffering. "I need time," she whispered, "to understand what freedom means, to figure out who I am when I'm not afraid." "I know," he squeezed her hands gently, "and I'll be here, for as long as it takes." She nodded, exhausted but somehow lighter. The weight she'd carried for 2 years, the fear, the constant vigilance, the crushing helplessness had lifted. Cedric was gone. She was free. Now she just had to learn what to do with that freedom. Chapter 7. Healing and Hope. Spring arrived at Ravenshaw like a promise kept. The snow melted away, revealing green grass and early crocuses pushing through the earth. The air lost its bitter edge, softening into something almost warm. Birds returned to the trees, filling the mornings with song. 2 months had passed since Cedric's arrest. 2 months since Eveline had legally reclaimed Willowmere, the papers signed, the inheritance secured, her father's estate finally hers. She should have been happy, should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow. Eveline stood at the window of her room at Ravenshaw, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. She had been visiting Willowmere regularly with Alistair, making plans for restoration. The manor needed work. Years of Cedric's neglect had taken their toll, but the bones were good. Her father had built it well. She went through all the proper motions, met with the estate steward to review accounts, discussed repairs with the master carpenter, planned which rooms to restore first, made lists of servants to hire, furniture to purchase, gardens to replant, but none of it touched the emptiness inside her. Alistair had noticed, of course. She caught him watching her sometimes with concern in his grey eyes, but he gave her space, never pressed, simply remained steady and present whenever she needed him, which was always. She needed him always, and that terrified her. Was she replacing one dependence with another, trading Cedric's cage for a gilded one of her own making? The thought made her chest tight with panic. She needed to know who she was alone, needed to prove to herself, if no one else, that she could stand on her own 2 feet. That evening, she found Alistair in the library, reviewing correspondence from his steward. "I'm moving to Willowmere," she said without preamble. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before he controlled it. "Of course, it's your home. The repairs are complete enough. The east wing is livable, and I've hired a small staff." She twisted her hands together. I need some time there. Alone." Something painful crossed his expression, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. "I understand. Will you visit?" "Whenever you wish." His voice was carefully neutral. "You need only send word." She nodded, unable to explain the confusing tangle of emotions in her chest. She wanted to stay, wanted to remain in the comfortable routine they'd built, the easy companionship, the way her heart lifted every time he entered a room. But she also needed to leave, needed to find out who Eveline Harrow was when she wasn't afraid, wasn't dependent, wasn't defined by what had been done to her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for understanding, always." Willowmere was smaller than Ravenshaw, but it welcomed her like an embrace. The manor sat on a gentle rise overlooking rolling farmland, built of warm, honey-colored stone that seemed to glow in the afternoon light. Tall windows let in the spring sunshine, and the rooms, though in need of updating, had an air of comfortable elegance rather than grandiose display. This had been her father's home, the place where he'd lived and loved and raised her until his death, and now it was hers. The first few days, Eveline simply explored. She wandered through rooms she didn't remember, ran her fingers along furniture her father had chosen, stood in doorways trying to conjure memories that remained frustratingly out of reach. But it was in his study that she finally felt connected to him. The room faced east, catching the morning light. Bookshelves lined 2 walls, filled with volumes on everything from agriculture to philosophy. A large desk sat beneath the window, its surface worn smooth by years of use. And in the desk drawers, she found his journals. Eveline carried them to the chair by the fireplace and began to read. Her father's voice came through in every line, warm, thoughtful, deeply kind. He wrote about his business dealings with fairness and principle, about his love for her mother with tenderness that made Eveline's throat tight, and about her childhood with such joy that tears spilled down her cheeks. Eveline turns 3 today. She insists the moon is made of cheese. I haven't the heart to correct her. Margaret says I'm encouraging fanciful thinking, but I believe a child should be allowed to see magic in the world for as long as possible. Eveline laughed through her tears, pressing the journal to her chest. She didn't remember that birthday, didn't remember believing such a silly thing, but knowing her father had delighted in it, had treasured those moments, it made her feel less alone. She spent days reading through his journals and business records. What she discovered surprised her. Her father had been a successful merchant, yes, but more than that, he had been fair, generous, beloved by those who worked with him. He paid his workers well, refused to engage in practices he considered exploitative, gave generously to local charities. One entry particularly struck her. "A man asked me today why I don't maximize profits as others do. You could be twice as wealthy," he said, "but what use is wealth built on the suffering of others? I want Eveline to inherit more than money. I want her to inherit a name she can be proud of, a legacy of treating people with dignity. That is worth more than any fortune." Eveline closed the journal and looked around the study at the simple but well-made furniture, the quality books, the comfortable elegance that spoke of success achieved with integrity. Her worth didn't come from nobility or grand titles. It came from character, from choices, from the legacy her father had left her. And she could build on that legacy, make her own choices, create her own path. The realization settled something inside her. Over the following week, Eveline threw herself into managing Willowmere. She hired back the servants Cedric had dismissed, loyal people who had served her father and remembered Eveline as a child. She reopened the village school her father had funded, ensuring the teacher had proper supplies and a decent wage. She reviewed the estate operations with the steward, learning about crop rotations and tenant relations and 100 other details. To her surprise, she was good at this. The careful planning, the attention to detail, the genuine care for the people who depended on the estate, it all came naturally to her. But every evening, as the sun set and the manor grew quiet, loneliness crept in. She missed Alistair, missed his steady presence, his quiet humor, the way he listened when she spoke as if her words truly mattered. missed the comfortable silence of working side by side in the library, missed the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. She had proven she could stand alone, could manage an estate, make decisions, forge her own path. But standing alone and being alone were two different things, and she didn't want to be alone. Not anymore. 2 weeks after moving to Willowmere, Eveline was in the garden supervising the planting of new rose bushes when she heard hooves on the drive. Her heart leaped before she even turned around. Alistair. He dismounted with his usual grace, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the uncertainty in his expression. "I'm sorry for intruding," he said, not coming closer. "I told myself I'd wait until you called for me, but I couldn't. I needed to know you were well." Eveline felt something warm bloom in her chest. "I'm glad you came." Relief flooded his features. "Truly? Truly." They walked through the gardens together, following the paths her father had laid out years ago. New growth pushed up through the soil tulips and daffodils, herbs and climbing roses that would bloom in summer. "Tell me what you've been doing," Alistair said. So she did. Told him about her father's journals, about reopening the school, about learning to manage the estate, about discovering she was good at it, capable of it. "I thought reclaiming Willowmere would fill the emptiness," she said, stopping beside a stone bench. "And it's helped. I know who I am now, who my father was. I'm proud of the legacy he left me." "But," Alistair prompted gently, "but it's not enough." She turned to face him. "The estate, the money, the justice, none of it matters without." She stopped, suddenly shy. How did she put into words what she'd only just realized herself? Alistair took her hands, his touch warm and familiar. "Without what, Eveline?" She met his eyes and saw everything she felt reflected back at her: love, longing, hope, fear. "Without love," she whispered. "Without partnership. Without you." His breath caught. "Eveline, I've been searching too, you know." The words tumbled out now, urgent and true. "For myself, for purpose, for home. And I found it. I found myself in my father's journals, in managing this estate, in making my own choices. But home isn't Willowmere or Ravenshaw." She squeezed his hands. "It's wherever you are." Alistair pulled her close, one hand cupping her face. "I've been searching for you, not just these 8 months, but all my life without knowing it. From the moment I found you in that storm, I knew. You're everything I never knew I needed. I love you," she said, the words both a confession and a liberation. "And I love you." His voice was rough with emotion. "Marry me, Eveline. Not because I saved you, not because of duty or obligation, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Joy burst through her like sunshine breaking through clouds. She laughed even as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her then. Their first kiss was everything she had dreamed, and nothing she had expected, soft and sweet and achingly tender. His lips moved against hers with reverent gentleness, as if she was something precious and breakable. But she wasn't breakable, not anymore. She kissed him back with all the love and longing she'd been holding inside, her hands sliding up to frame his face. He made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, the kiss deepening into something that made her head spin and her heart soar. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he murmured. "Why didn't you?" "Because you needed time to be whole, and I needed you to choose me from strength, not need. I am choosing you, from strength, from love, from absolute certainty." She pulled back to look at him properly. "You're not my rescuer, Alistair. You're my partner, my equal, my choice." His smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face. He reached into his pocket and produced a ring simple and elegant, with a small sapphire that caught the light. "It was my mother's," he said softly. "She died when I was born, but my father always said she would have wanted someone special to wear it. Someone brave and kind and true." He met her eyes. "She'd want you to have it." Eveline held out her left hand, watching as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the sapphire gleaming like a piece of captured sky. "When?" she asked. "Whenever you're ready. Tomorrow or a year from now. I'm not going anywhere." She looked down at the ring, then up at the man she loved. "Soon. I want to start our life together soon. I've wasted enough time being afraid, being alone. I don't want to waste another moment." "Neither do I." They stood together in her father's garden as the sun began its descent, wrapped in each other's arms. Around them, new life pushed up through the soil, roses and tulips, and all manner of growing things reaching for the light. Eveline thought of that terrible night in the storm, how she had collapsed in the snow, certain she was going to die, how the cold had seeped into her bones and stolen her hope, and then strong arms had lifted her, a warm voice had promised safety, and everything had changed. She had been lost, but she had found herself, had been broken, but she had healed, had been alone, but she had found love. "What are you thinking?" Alistair asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That I was meant to freeze in that storm so you could find me. You were meant to survive," he corrected gently. "Everything else is just us choosing each other." She smiled against his chest. "Then I choose you, today and every day, for the rest of my life, and I choose you." The promise hung between them, solid and true. Not a fairy tale rescue, but something better, two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk into the light together. As the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Eveline Harrow stood in her garden with the man she loved and felt, for the first time in her life, completely whole. The storm had tried to claim her, but love had proven stronger, and from that love, she would build a future more beautiful than any she had dared to dream. Chapter 8. A Future Reclaimed. June, 1818. The chapel at Ravenshaw was small and ancient, built of grey stone that had stood for 3 centuries. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the worn flagstones in jeweled colours: ruby, sapphire, emerald, gold. Eveline stood at the back of the chapel, her hand resting on Mr. Whitmore's arm. The solicitor had offered to give her away when she confessed she had no family left, and the gesture had moved her to tears. "Ready, my lady?" he asked gently. She looked down the short aisle to where Alistair waited before the altar. He wore a coat of deep blue superfine, his cravat simply tied, his dark hair slightly dishevelled, as if he'd been running his hands through it nervously. Their eyes met, and the world seemed to still. "Yes," she whispered, "I'm ready." She had chosen a simple gown of cream silk that Mrs. Pemberton had helped her select. No elaborate embroidery, no heavy jewels, just clean lines and delicate lace at the sleeves. In her hair, she wore a circlet of wildflowers that Mary had woven that morning, daisies and lavender and tiny white roses. As she walked down the aisle, she saw the small gathering of witnesses, Mrs. Pemberton dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, the butler standing proud and straight, Dr. Hartford smiling warmly, Sir William Thornbury, who had ensured justice was served, Mary, her dear friend, beaming with joy. But mostly, she saw Alistair. His eyes filled with emotion as she approached, and when she reached him, she saw his hand trembling slightly as he took hers. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "You're perfect," she whispered back. The vicar began the ceremony, but Eveline barely heard the traditional words. All her attention was on Alistair, on the way his thumb stroked circles on her hand, on the love shining in his eyes. When it came time for vows, they had chosen to speak their own. "Eveline," Alistair said, his voice steady despite the emotion she could see in his face, "I promise to be your partner in all things, to respect your strength while offering mine, to listen when you speak and value what you say, to stand beside you, not above or below, but equal in all ways. I promise to love you not just today, but every day, for the rest of our lives." Eveline's throat tightened, but she managed to speak clearly. "Alistair, I promise to choose you every day, as I choose you today, to build our life together with honesty and trust, to be your comfort in sorrow and your companion in joy. To love you not because you saved me, but because you saw me, truly saw me, and loved what you found. I promise to spend every day proving worthy of that love." "You already are," he whispered, "just for her." The vicar pronounced them husband and wife, and when Alistair kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise, Eveline felt something settle deep in her soul. She was home. The wedding breakfast was held in Ravenshaw's dining room, intimate and warm. Someone, probably Mrs. Pemberton, had filled the room with flowers, roses and peonies, and sweet-smelling jasmine that perfumed the air. As Eveline looked around at the small gathering, these people who had helped save her, who had believed in her, who had become her chosen family, a thought struck her with such force she had to set down her wine glass. A year ago, she had been dying in the snow with nothing. No family, no future, no hope. Now she had everything. Later, after the meal, When someone pushed back the furniture and the musicians began to play, Alistair led her to the center of the room for their first dance as husband and wife. He held her close, one hand at her waist, the other cradling hers against his chest. They moved together to a waltz, and Eveline marveled at how natural it felt, how right, as if they had been dancing together for years. "Happy," he whispered against her ear. She looked up at him, at this man who had searched for her, saved her, loved her, happier than I knew was possible. His smile was brilliant. "Good, because I intend to spend the rest of our lives making you even happier." "That's quite an ambitious goal." "I'm an ambitious man." She laughed, and the sound felt like freedom. Summer, 1819. Eveline sat across the desk from a young woman whose hands shook as she clutched a worn shawl around her shoulders. Her name was Margaret, like Eveline's mother, and she bore the same haunted look Eveline remembered from her own reflection a year ago. "He'll kill me if he finds me," Margaret whispered. "Or worse, he'll take my daughter." "He won't find you," Eveline said firmly. "We have a safe house in the village, far from London. You'll have a room, meals, and time to decide what comes next. Our solicitor will help with the legal proceedings. I have no money, no way to pay. The foundation covers all expenses." Eveline leaned forward, holding the woman's frightened gaze. "Margaret, you're not alone anymore. Do you understand? You're not alone." The woman broke down, sobbing, and Eveline came around the desk to hold her while she wept. This was the work she and Alistair had built together. Using part of her inheritance from Willowmere, they had established a foundation that provided safe housing and legal aid for women escaping abusive situations. Eveline interviewed applicants personally, secured placements, offered the hope she had once desperately needed. It was hard work. Each woman's story reopened old wounds, reminded her of her own suffering and her mother's trapped desperation. But it was also necessary, essential. After Margaret left with directions to the safe house and enough money for the journey, Eveline sat alone in the study at Willowmere, exhausted and heartsore. That's where Alistair found her, staring out the window at nothing. "This work is hard on you," he said gently, pulling a chair close to hers. "It's necessary." She turned to him, letting him see the tears in her eyes. "I can't save my mother, but I can save others." He pulled her into his arms, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You have the biggest heart," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. She pulled back slightly, a small smile playing at her lips despite the emotional weight of the day. Taking his hand, she placed it on her belly, slightly rounded now, though barely noticeable beneath her dress. "Big enough for 3? She asked softly. Alistair went very still, his eyes widened, dropping to where his hand rested. "Eveline, truly?" She nodded, her smile growing at the wonder in his expression. "Dr. Hartford confirmed it yesterday. The baby should arrive in early spring." "A baby?" His voice was awed. "Our baby." Then he was lifting her, spinning her around, laughing with pure joy. She squealed, clutching his shoulders. "Alistair, put me down before you." He set her down immediately, his hands hovering anxiously. "Did I hurt you? The baby?" She laughed, cupping his face. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass. We're both perfectly fine." That evening, they sat together in the nursery at Ravenshaw, a room that had stood empty since Alistair's birth, and made plans. They discussed names, debated paint colors, dreamed aloud about the child who would join their family. And when Alistair placed his hand on her belly and whispered promises to the baby growing there, Eveline felt her heart overflow with love. December, 1821. Snow fell softly outside the windows of Ravenshaw, blanketing the estate in white. But inside, everything was warm and bright. Garlands of evergreen draped the staircases, tied with red ribbon. Candles glowed in every window. The scent of cinnamon and cloves drifted from the kitchens, where Mrs. Pemberton was overseeing the preparation of Christmas dinner. Eveline stood at the drawing-room window, watching 2 small figures play in the snow. Catherine, just turned 3, was attempting to build a snowman with intense concentration. Her dark curls escaped from beneath her hood, and her little face was scrunched with determination, so like her father when he was focused on a task. Thomas, 2 years old and full of mischief, kept toddling over to knock down whatever Catherine built, shrieking with laughter each time. "Thomas, no." Catherine's voice drifted through the glass. "Bad brother." But Thomas just laughed harder and knocked down another pile of snow. Eveline smiled, her hand resting on her belly where a 3rd child grew. due to arrive in the spring. She was tired. Pregnancy at 31 was different than it had been at 23, but deeply content. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind, and Alistair's chin came to rest on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice a low rumble against her back. "About snow, about storms." She felt him tense slightly, knowing where her mind had gone. The story of how they met was both beautiful and terrible, and sometimes the terrible part still haunted them both. "4 years ago, I was dying in a winter storm," she said quietly. "I'd lost everything. I thought I had no future." "Eveline, let me finish." She turned in his arms to face him. "I was dying, and you found me. You wrapped me in your cloak and said you'd been searching for me." He held her tighter, his eyes intense with emotion. "And I had been. I know, but here's what I've realized." She touched his face, tracing the familiar line of his jaw. "I was searching too, for home, for love, for myself. And that storm, the worst night of my life, led me here. To you, to our children, to this life." She gestured to the window, to their children playing in the gentle snow, to the warmth and love surrounding them. "I wouldn't change it," she said firmly, "any of it, because it brought me you." His eyes grew suspiciously bright. "I love you, more every day, and I love you." They kissed, soft and familiar, the kiss of longtime partners who had weathered storms and built something lasting from the wreckage. A shriek from outside made them both laugh. Catherine had slipped in the snow and landed on her bottom. Eveline moved to go help, but Alistair stopped her. "I'll get her. You stay warm. I'm pregnant, not an invalid. Indulge me." She watched as he strode outside, his long coat flaring behind him. He scooped up both children, one in each arm, and they squealed with delight as he spun them around. Even from inside, she could hear their laughter. "Your family is beautiful, my lady." Eveline turned to find Mrs. Pemberton standing in the doorway with a tray of hot chocolate, her eyes warm with affection. "Yes," Eveline agreed, her voice thick with emotion. "They are." Later that evening, after the children had been fed and bathed and tucked into bed with stories, the family gathered in the drawing room. Catherine and Thomas played with wooden toys by the fire, a set of animals Alistair had commissioned from a village craftsman. Eveline worked on embroidery while Alistair read aloud from a Christmas story, occasionally pausing to show the children the illustrations. It was peaceful, ordinary, perfect. "Papa," Catherine said suddenly, looking up from her toy horse, "tell us how you met Mama." Alistair and Eveline exchanged glances, both smiling. "Well," Alistair began, setting aside the book, "it was a snowy night, much like this one." He told them a edited version, the storm, the rescue, the search. He made it an adventure rather than the near tragedy it had been, and the children listened with wide eyes. When he finished with, "and they lived happily ever after," Thomas clapped his chubby hands together. But Catherine, ever thoughtful, asked, "Are we your happily ever after?" Eveline's throat tightened. She set aside her embroidery and opened her arms. Both children scrambled into her lap carefully because they knew about the baby. "You are," she said, kissing each of their heads. "All of you, every single day. You are our greatest joy and our happily ever after." "And the baby?" Thomas asked, patting her belly. "And the baby," Eveline confirmed. "When he or she arrives, they'll be part of our happily ever after too." Catherine seemed satisfied with this answer and returned to her toys. Soon after, both children grew drowsy, and Alistair carried them upstairs to bed, one in each arm. That night, after the house had grown quiet and the children were dreaming, Eveline and Alistair stood on the balcony outside their bedchamber. Fresh snow fell gently, each flake drifting down like a blessing. It was nothing like the violent storm that had nearly killed her 4 years ago. This snow was peaceful, beautiful, a winter blessing rather than a curse. Alistair wrapped his cloak around both of them, just as he had that first night, and pulled her against his chest. "Warm enough?" he asked. She leaned into him, breathing in his familiar scent. "Always. With you, I'm always warm. We've built a good life. We've built a perfect life." She turned to face him, her hands resting on his chest. "From the ashes of everything we lost, we built something beautiful." They stood together, wrapped in his cloak, watching their future fall softly from the sky. Around them, Ravenshaw slept, their children dreaming, their staff resting, their home filled with warmth and love. Eveline thought of the girl she had been broken, abandoned, certain she would die alone in the cold, and she thought of the woman she had become, loved, cherished, surrounded by family. "Thank you," she whispered, looking up at her husband. "For what?" "For searching for me, for finding me, for loving me." He kissed her then, tender and true, tasting of snow and promise. "I'd search 1,000 storms to find you, every single time." And in that moment, surrounded by love and warmth and family, Eveline Ravenshaw knew she was finally, truly home. The storm had tried to claim her, but love had proven stronger, and in its strength, she had built a future more beautiful than any she'd dared to dream. If Eveline and Alistair's journey from despair to love touched your heart, please show your support by hitting that like button. It truly helps this channel grow and allows me to bring you more heartwarming historical romance stories. Don't forget to subscribe to Lyra's Romance Stories so you never miss another tale of love, redemption, and happily ever afters. With your subscription, you'll be notified every time a new story is released. Which moment from this story touched you most? Was it when Alistair first found Eveline in the storm, the emotional discovery of her father's letters, or perhaps the beautiful ending with their children playing in the snow? Share your favorite scene in the comments below. I love hearing from you and reading your thoughts. And if you're craving more historical romance, check out the story appearing on your screen right now. I think you'll fall in love with it just as much as this one. Thank you so much for spending this time with me in Eveline and Alistair's world. Until our next story, remember, even in life's darkest storms, love can light the way home. This is Lyra, and I'll see you in the next romance.